I'm Lena Hovanesian here for ANC America, here with international hero Garo Paylan, who serves as a member of the Turkish Parliament, ready to fight for justice, for minority rights and democracy in the heart of Turkey. Garo Paylan is the recipient of ANCA's 2017 Freedom Award. This dynamic Armenian member of the Turkish Parliament since 2015 is a human rights activist and co-founder of the People's Democratic Party in Turkey, representing Armenian, Kurdish, Greek, Jewish, and other minority rights. He is a man driven by higher purpose, honor, strength, courage, compassion, and self-sacrifice, qualities that can only describe a modern-day hero. In 2016, at the 101st anniversary of the Armenian Genocide of 1915, Garo Paylan stood bravely before the Turkish Parliament in the very heart of the Ottoman Empire and declared the names of each member of the Armenian intelligentsia and leadership who were massacred at the outset of the Armenian Genocide. In his epic parliamentary speech, Mr. Paylan fearlessly condemned the actions by Ottoman Turkey and urged Turkey to come to terms with its past. He has vowed to continue to fight against genocide denial and for minority rights, and warns that Turkey is fertile ground for ongoing human rights abuses, as it has never been held accountable for its sordid past, and unpunished crimes repeat themselves. A few days later, in May of 2016, he was physically assaulted in the Turkish Parliament for no other reason than his Armenian ethnicity. As a consequence to Paylan's speech, the terms Armenian Genocide were abolished in the Turkish Parliament, and in January 2017, Mr. Paylan was suspended from the Parliament for referring to the Armenian Genocide. Mr. Paylan, it is an honor to have you here today. It was only yesterday that you stood in the heart of the Turkish Parliament and you spoke before the Parliament members at the 101st anniversary of the Armenian Genocide. One by one, you named all the Armenian intellectuals, leaders that were massacred. What were the things that happened in your youth, the formative years, that have driven you to become the courageous and brave man that you are today, who fights for justice?
Thank you very much, first of all. I'm from Malatya, and my grandparents suffered the genocide, and they chose to stay. I lost so many of my relatives. They chose to live in United States, Paris, Australia, but my parents chose to stay in Turkey. And to be a minority and to stay in Turkey where that crime, where we couldn't justice for our crime, genocide, is not so easy. And for about 80 years, we had to stay silent. But I was born in a house where my grandmother was there, and I was always asking her, Grandma, why don't you have brothers and sisters? And she was silent. She didn't want to tell about it, because I think if she would tell about those things, she thought I would be mad and I would do something wrong. It was understandable. But afterwards, I just learned what happened. And I was mad, of course. I became more Armenian somehow. Then I get to know some friends, the Kurds and the Turks, who are Democrats. And with them, we were struggling against human rights violations. Not only against the Armenians, of course, we were silent, but because we were struggling against human rights violations. I learned so much from them, and they learned so much from me. They didn't know what happened in 1915. I was trying to explain them, and the Kurds were suffering, let's say. I was struggling with them about the Kurdish rights. We learned from each other, and that is how I became a human rights activist, then a politician, of course. We care about each other with so many friends. You said in your question the Turks did those crimes. I never tell them. No, identities don't do the crimes. The politicians or terrible ideas, the terrible thoughts, the evil does the crimes. But they use the identities, they use the nationalism to do those kind of crimes. And I am struggling with so many Turks and Kurds who are Democrats. And Turkey is not Tayyip Erdogan. In Turkey, there are millions of Democrats who I am struggling with.
Currently, he fights an epic David versus Goliath battle for democratic values against the increasingly nationalistic Islamist Turkish regime, with a fascist coalition gaining power under President Erdogan. Erdogan's presidency shows the hallmarks of a dictatorship after the attempted coup in July 2016, in whose aftermath an unprecedented crackdown against perceived opposition and waves of purges have taken place. Media outlets have been shut down or are strictly controlled, and Turkey is considered to be the largest jailer of journalists. What is the best way for you to keep your line of communication open with your followers and your supporters when the media is being shut down by your opposition?
Until 2015, we had full media coverage, and we had a chance to tell to the Turkish people about our views, ideals, and we had really 13% of the votes, and we had 80 MPs in the parliament, and people were happy to hear from us. But the status quo saw this as a threat, and they started the war, and they ended the democratization, and they shut down all the media who are covering us. And unfortunately, Erdogan is controlling the media now, and they are not covering us. Every day they are swearing at us, but we don't have the right to respond on the media. We have the social media, of course, but it's not enough. All the dictators, all the fascist thoughts controls the media, and every day they lie on that media. That is why really we need support. Let's say our institutions are not functioning. Of course, there has to be somebody who is ruling the country, but there is no checks and balances system. As a parliamentarian, I can say the parliament is not functioning. The judiciary is not functioning, the media is not functioning. If those three institutions that does not function, it's a dictatorship, of course. But still we are struggling, my party and other oppositions. So we need support coming from the world. Let's say it is also good for, the world has to think, or United States has to think. Turkey used to be a candidate to be a democratic country, which has the Muslim majority, Sunni Muslim majority. And it was in our dreams that if Turkey can become a democratic country, it is going to recognize the genocide. And but we lost all those hopes, dreams, let's say. So we have to have a vision over Turkey to be a democratic country. And the Western powers has to support somehow the democratic institutions in Turkey.
You are a co-founder of the People's Democratic Party in Turkey and representative in the Turkish Parliament. As an advocate for minority rights and for recognition of the Armenian Genocide in Turkey, after the images we saw of you being verbally and physically assaulted in the parliament, what are the circumstances, do you think, ultimately that will lead to the Turkish government recognizing the Armenian Genocide? And do you think that the Turkish people and the population are ready for that to happen?
No. We just struggled for the genocide recognition in Turkey for years, after Hrant Dink, I can say, so many people were ready to hear about the Armenian story. And we were explaining them what happened, without, of course, the genocide word. Because I think words are not important. But of course, so many people are calling that crime as genocide. We were telling that something bad has happened. And if you don't recognize it, that crimes are going to lead for new crimes, not only for the Armenians, against the Kurds, against the Alawis, against the conservatives as well. Because if a murderer kills people and he or she doesn't pay the price, he or she becomes a serial killer. It is all like this. 102 years ago, whatever we suffered, the Kurds are suffering the same thing nowadays. So they understood this. They were ready to say that something bad has happened. And we could say that crime's name is genocide. It was not a big issue afterwards. Several times on the media I told about it. Still I'm telling that but the name of that crime is genocide, the Armenian genocide. But in the parliament last year, I used the word genocide, and they just said you can't do it anymore. Unfortunately, when the democratization is over, it's not only against the Kurds. It is against all kind of demands, you know. So this is a very dark winter for Turkey. And unfortunately, the Western powers turned a blind eye on the human rights violations, and that is poisoning our democracy.
Mr. Paylan has opened an investigation into the murder of iconic Armenian journalist Hrant Dink, who was assassinated in broad daylight in Turkey by complicit state actors 10 years ago, and whose murder has gone unresolved. You've also said that silence is not safe in Turkey, even after Hrant Dink's assassination in public. What do you mean by that?
If you look from here, you see only Erdogan. No, but I know millions of people, Turks, Kurds, from other identities, who struggle against Erdogan, and against not only Erdogan, against his thoughts, his nationalist view. And we give power to each other in our struggle. So, against fascist thoughts, against fascist ideas, you have to struggle. No, if you stay silent, even if you stay in your home, that fascist ideas finds you at home and does the same crime. So to stay silent is not safe. I always tell about it. And if you stay silent and if you step back, they come over you more and more. But if you have right, you raise your sound, they step back. That is what we do.
You recently traveled to Armenia in September for the Pan-Armenian Diasporan Conference. Which is the best course of action for Armenia as far as ties or diplomatic actions between Armenia and Turkey? Are there any benefits for Armenia, and do you wish to shepherd that relationship?
Yeah. Before I went to Armenia, I spoke with the Secretary of State of Turkey that I will go to Armenia, and I took the messages from him, and I just told those messages to the Armenian Prime Minister, President, and Secretary of State as well. I'm trying to establish a new diplomacy between Turkey and Armenia, because the border is closed, and if you have a neighbor and the door is closed for 25 years, you get used to live without each other, and they don't have. Both countries don't have any leverage on each other, only shouting at each other and only using the Armenian word and the Turk word as an enemy. Now, if you don't touch each other, you have biased thoughts about each other, and it is a vicious circle. I want to break this. The Turkish people and the Armenian people are so close when you look to their culture. Because if you go to Yozgat, Malatya, Kayseri, those people don't know that the food that they are eating, the music that they are listening, is the Armenian culture or the Turkish culture, because we just had that culture. We lived for hundreds of years, centuries together. They don't know. But if I can if we can open the door, and if I can make people touch each other, they will see that they are so close, even closer than the Azerbaijan people. That is my goal. I will try to do my best about this diplomacy, because if we can't do it, the Turkish nationalists are going to use this card as an enemy. I want to take this card from those nationalist hands.
In a long line of violations, including the recent attack on peaceful protesters in Washington, D.C. by Erdogan's detail, and also the freezing of visas between the two countries because of the arrest of a U.S. consulate employee. What is the best course of actions by the Western powers in order to hold Turkey accountable for its violations?
Now, my country suffered a coup attempt last year, and it's a huge trauma for the Turkish democracy. And unfortunately, President Erdogan saw this as a God's gift, and he told about this. This is a God's gift, and he is doing his the same operations against the opposition camp or media or the parliament. Unfortunately, this is a trauma, but we can't get over it. So, as I said, the Western world turned a blind eye on the human rights violations because they have biased thoughts against they think about in an Islamophobic way. But we need to find a way to engage, not only shout at each other. To shout at Erdogan doesn't work. I think to try to engage with the Turkish people works. To speak with them, not only to Erdogan, shout at each other, because you think about it, Erdogan gave the order to his bodyguards to do that at the center of Washington. Think about it. What can he do in Ankara or Istanbul to us, to the opposition camp? But if you can influence the Turkish people, if we can speak with them, if we can engage with them, and ask for them to work in a democratic way, it will help us more, not only shout at the Turkish people, because the nationalists benefits from each other. The populist leaders benefits from each other if they shout at each other.
What is it that keeps you passionate, humble, and always ready to fight for justice, even in the face of adversity and risk to your own life in the Turkish Parliament?
We have an open wound for 102 years, and we couldn't find the justice for that. And that unpunished crime is leading new crimes. I want to make this fascist idea live a defeat. If we can't make it, it will go on. We are struggling. I don't know. The first generation couldn't just succeed. The second generation couldn't succeed. I'm the third generation. I will give the struggle. If I can succeed, these crimes are going to end. If not, the fourth generation is going to go on. We don't have that right to transfer this to the fourth generation, because it is always bloody. We will give this struggle. I want everybody to give this support to us to end this in this generation. We have to find a way. All the Armenian world, all the Turkish world, all the Armenian Democrats, all the Turkish Democrats, all the Kurdish Democrats have to find a way. Because we are from that land, we are from Anatolia, we are from Turkey. That crime happened in Turkey. We have to solve this problem in Turkey.
Thank you so much, Mr. Paylan. It has been an honor to meet with you today. You are an inspiration for Armenians all over the world and a beacon of hope for human rights. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Garo Paylan's wish for Armenians is to get rid of their fears and feel strong and powerful again. And he leads by way of powerful example, walking into the eye of the storm in the Turkish Parliament. He is a brave activist swimming in treacherous waters, willing to put his life at stake for what he believes and for those whose rights he protects. An intrepid voice for minorities and an international champion for human rights and democracy, he fights courageously as a soldier for justice, not only for Armenians around the world, but for humanity. It has been an inspiration and humbling experience to meet with our international champion for justice, Garo Paylan. I'm Lena Hovanesian for ANCA.